Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Asaba, where every street corner smells of roasted corn and the sound of life never fades, there lived a woman whose name was on everyone's lips. Madam Chioma. She wasn't a politician, nor a film star, yet her reputation stretched from government houses to the markets. She was known as the biggest caterer in town. Her food was more than a meal. It was an experience. People say that once you tasted her jollof rice, you would forget every other cook you had ever known. The grains were neither soft nor firm, each glistening with vegetable oil and rich tomato sauce that carried the scent of smoked fish and pepper. Her fried meat was tender, her soups had depth, and her pastries melted in the mouth. There was something about her cooking. It spoke of patience, skill, and pride. Madam Chioma's business had grown from a single pot and charcoal stove to an empire known across Asaba. She called it Chioma's Royal Dishes. If you saw her white van with gold lettering drive past, you knew that an important occasion was happening somewhere in town. But Chioma had one guiding principle. She never cooked for small people. Her words were always the same whenever a low-budget customer approached. "I'm sorry, my dear, my services are for dignitaries." And she meant it. She worked for politicians, oil executives, commissioners, and visiting delegates. If the event wasn't grand, then it wasn't hers to cook. People gossiped that she was proud, but she brushed it off with a smile. To her, she wasn't being proud. She was maintaining her standard. Chioma dressed the part too. She wore neatly pressed uniforms, often in shades of white and gold, and moved with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her worth. Her workers adored her but also feared her strictness. She demanded excellence from everyone, from the girls who chopped onions to the men who carried coolers. Every morning, her shop on Okpanam Road came alive before dawn. The clatter of pots, mixed with gospel music on a small speaker. The aroma of pepper soup filled the air, and her firm voice rang out over the noise. "Ne, taste that stew again. Is the salt enough? Uche, wipe that table properly. Clients can come in anytime." Her presence commanded respect. Even her competitors admitted that Chioma had something special, a kind of magic in her hands. She had cooked for governors, traditional rulers, and corporate gatherings. She knew how to design a buffet table that looked like royalty itself. But beyond her fame and her flawless dishes, Chioma had a strange habit that set her apart. She loved to cook in her clients' homes. While others preferred to prepare food in their shops and deliver to the venue, Chioma insisted on going to the client's house, setting up her pot and gas there, and cooking from start to finish under their roof. When people asked why she worked that way, she would laugh softly and say, "I like to feel the kitchen where my food will be born." It made sense to her. She believed cooking on-site kept the food fresh and gave it a personal touch. And of course, it also made her clients feel important. To Chioma, her presence was part of the package, a sign of status. And truthfully, she enjoyed the attention it brought. Her workers sometimes whispered among themselves that one day this habit might get them into trouble. But Chioma dismissed their fears. "Nothing would happen," she would say. "We are doing clean business." One bright Thursday morning, the sun was warm over the city of Asaba, and Madam Chioma was cooking for a client. The activities were already full of life. Her workers moved up and down, washing pots, peeling onions, and stirring large pots of soup. The air smelled of fried oil and pepper. From a small speaker on the corner, gospel music played softly, the kind that made her hum while she walked. Chioma stood near the entrance of the hall where the event would take place, giving orders with her usual energy. She was preparing food for a commissioner's daughter's engagement party. Everything had to be perfect. That was her style. Then her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up. A calm, confident male voice spoke on the other end. "Good morning, Madam Chioma. My name is Mr. Raymond. I got your number from one of your clients. My boss is hosting a private dinner for some delegates from Lagos. He said he wants only you to handle the cooking." Chioma's eyes lit up. "Delegates from Lagos?" she asked quickly, adjusting her head tie. Yes, ma, the man replied. It's a high-profile event, very private. My boss has heard a lot about you. He wants the best, and your name came up. Chioma smiled proudly. She was used to big jobs, but the way the man spoke made it sound like something very special. Don't worry about anything, the man continued. We provide all the ingredients, the kitchen, everything. You just need to come with your team and tools. We'll even send a car to pick you up. That caught her attention. A car? No client had ever done that before. Where will you pick us from? She asked. From Okwanam Junction, the man said. By 12 noon on Saturday. Just wait there with your team. Our driver will come for you. His voice was calm and sure. The kind that didn't sound like someone who could be lying. When the call ended, Chioma stood still for a moment. Her heart was beating fast from excitement. She could already imagine the faces of her workers when they heard they'd be cooking for delegates from Lagos. She quickly gathered them together. Listen, everyone, she said proudly. We have a big job this weekend. A private dinner for delegates. They said they will send a car to pick us up. Make sure you all look neat. This one must be our best. Her workers clapped and cheered. They loved good news, and this sounded like a blessing. Later that day, Chioma called her sister and shared the news. 5 million naira? Ne, can you imagine? Just to cook one meal. Eh? Chioma, that's big money, oh, her sister said. But make sure you know the people well. Don't worry, Chioma laughed. These are high-class people. I can tell. That night, she could barely sleep. Her mind was full of thought. What she would wear, what kind of dishes to prepare, how proud she'd feel when those important men tasted her food. On Friday, she ironed her uniform herself, a clean white outfit with gold buttons and the logo, Chioma's Royal Dishes, boldly written across the chest. She also polished her black shoes and neatly arranged her knives, spoons and chopping boards into a big silver case. By Saturday morning, everything was ready. Her team arrived early, all dressed in matching uniforms, smiling and full of excitement. They prayed together before leaving. Father, guide us today, Chioma said softly, and let this job open new doors for us. When the prayer ended, everyone shouted, Amen. Then they packed their tools and headed for Okpanam Junction to wait for their pickup. As they stood at the junction, under the hot afternoon sun, a few people looked at them curiously. Then suddenly, a shiny black Lamborghini SUV pulled up in front of them. The car was spotless, with tinted windows that reflected the sunlight. People around started whispering. One asked, See that cow? Who is it for? Another responded, It came for Madam Chioma. Can't you see? Chioma smiled proudly. For a moment, she felt like a celebrity. She turned to her team and said, You see? I told you, big people don't disappoint. Then 2 tall men stepped out of the car, both wearing black suits and dark glasses. One of them spoke politely. Are you Madam Chioma and her team? Yes, we are, she answered confidently. Good. Please enter. Our boss is waiting. We are behind schedule. Chioma nodded. Her heart raced, but she didn't show it. She was used to working with rich people, and this kind of treatment made her feel respected. She turned to her workers and said, Come on, everyone, let's go. Make sure you hold your tools well. They packed themselves into the car, 4 at the back, 3 in the middle, and Chioma in front beside one of the men. The seats were soft like sponge, and the car smelled of new leather and perfume. It was cool inside. The air conditioner blew softly against their faces. As the car began to move, Chioma smiled and whispered to herself, God, see how far you've brought me, from a small cook to riding in a Lamborghini. The journey started smoothly. At first, they could still recognize the familiar parts of town, the main market, the roundabout, and a few tall buildings. But after some minutes, the road became quieter. The car turned off the main road and entered a narrow path surrounded by trees. Chioma looked out through the tinted glass but couldn't see much. Everywhere seemed lonely. No signboards, no people walking, no cars passing. Then one of the men turned around and spoke firmly. Please, everyone, for our boss's privacy, you have to wear these. He held up a small black bag and began to hand out blindfolds, one for each of them. At first, the team laughed softly, thinking it was a joke. Ha! Blindfold? For what now? One of the women said nervously. Please, don't be afraid, the man replied. It's part of our boss's security rules. We don't want anyone knowing the location. Chioma hesitated for a moment. Something didn't feel right, but she looked at her workers. They were already putting on the blindfolds, giggling awkwardly. She didn't want to appear scared or unprofessional. So she took a deep breath and said, all right, let's cooperate. We are dealing with important people. They probably want privacy. The man nodded without smiling. As soon as everyone wore their blindfolds, the car became completely silent. Then the driver increased his speed. Chioma could feel the car moving fast. She couldn't see anything, only the darkness behind the blindfold and the soft vibration of the moving car. Her heartbeat became louder in the chest. She tried to tell how long they had been driving, but time felt strange. It could have been 30 minutes or 2 hours. She couldn't tell. Every now and then, she heard whispers between the two men in front. Their voices were low, too low to understand. At one point, the car made a sharp turn, and one of her workers screamed, Ah! Please drive gently! The men didn't respond. Chioma started to feel uneasy. Something inside her said, this is not normal. But she pushed the thought away. No, Chioma, she whispered quietly. You are overthinking. Maybe this is how big people protect themselves. Finally, after what felt like forever, the car began to slow down. She could hear the crunching sound of gravel under the tires like they had entered a compound. Then the car stopped. The man in front spoke again, his tone still calm but firm. Please remain seated. Don't remove your blindfold until we say so. They heard car doors opening and closing. Footsteps followed. Chioma sat still, her hands on her lap, praying silently. The air inside the car felt colder now, not from the air conditioner, but from fear creeping into their hearts. After a few minutes, a new voice spoke from outside, deep, heavy, and commanding. You can now remove the blindfolds now. Chioma's hands trembled as she untied hers. Her eyes blinked fast as light flooded in. As her vision cleared, what she saw made her mouth fall open. When Chioma and her team stepped out of the car, the first thing they noticed was how quiet the place was. No sound of birds, no voices, no music, just silence. The mansion stood tall and wide, with white walls that shone under the afternoon sun. It looked like something out of a movie. Clean, beautiful, and expensive. Even the flowers at the entrance looked too perfect, as if they were not real. The tall gate behind them closed slowly with a heavy sound. Gang! Chioma turned to look, but the men in black suits were already walking ahead. This way, one of them said coldly. They followed him, still in shock at the beauty of the place. The compound had marble tiles instead of sand. A long swimming pool ran beside the path that led to the main house. Chioma's workers whispered among themselves, trying not to sound afraid. See this kind of house. Ha! Madam, your name don't finally reach big people hand though. But Chioma didn't answer. Something about the quietness didn't sit right with her. She noticed that although the mansion was huge, there were no maids, no security dogs, no children playing, just strange-looking men standing at corners, watching without smiling. They were finally taken inside through a glass door that opened automatically. The living room was breathtaking. Golden chandeliers, white leather sofas, a huge painting of a man in traditional clothes hanging on the wall. Everywhere smelled of a new paint and expensive perfume. One of the men led them straight to the kitchen. It was the biggest kitchen Chioma had ever seen in her life. There were 5 large gas burners, industrial pots, clean knives, and a long silver counter that stretched across the room. The floor sparkled. Everything looked brand new. You'll cook here, the man said. Everything you need is already in this kitchen. Just prepare yourself. The ingredients will soon arrive. Chioma nodded nervously. Okay, sir, she replied softly. The men left the room, locking the door quietly behind them. For a while, Chioma and her team just stood there, Looking around, one of her assistants laughed lightly. "Madam, this kind of kitchen can make a person forget home," she joked. But Chioma didn't laugh. Her eyes were restless. Something about this job didn't feel like the others. Still, she told herself to relax. Maybe the men were just strict because of who their boss was. Minutes turned into hours. They arranged the pots, cleared the counter, and waited for the ingredients, but no one came. Then suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. 4 men entered the kitchen. The same men in black suits. They were carrying a large black bag. The bag looked heavy. It sat in the middle and left faint stains on the floor as they dragged it. Chioma's heart began to beat fast. She took a step back, watching silently. Without saying a word, the men dropped the bag in front of them. One of them unzipped it slowly. The moment the bag opened, a thick, metallic smell filled the room. The smell of blood. Then Chioma saw it. A human body, freshly killed. Her scream caught in her throat. One of her workers shouted, "Jesus!" and fell to the floor. Another one covered her mouth, trembling. The men didn't flinch. Their faces were blank. One of them said calmly, "This is your meat. Cut it, cook it, and do it well." Chioma's eyes widened in shock. "What?" she stammered. You mean we should cook this?" "Yes," the man replied coldly. "That is why you are here." Her legs felt weak. She shook her head quickly. No, sir, I can't. We can't do that. We cook food, but not..." Before she could finish, one of the men pulled out a gun and pointed it at her chest. The sound of the metal clicking froze everyone. "You will cook," he said quietly, "or you will join the meat." The room went silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing filled the air. Chioma looked at her workers. Their faces were pale with fear. One of the men in her team started crying softly. She wanted to be brave, but her body was shaking from head to toe. Slowly, they handed her a sharp knife. "Start with this," one of them ordered. Her hands trembled as she held the knife. She moved closer to the body. It was a young man. His chest had a fresh wound and his head was missing. The blood was still warm, dripping onto the white tiles. Her workers stood behind her, whispering prayers under their breath. "God, please save us. God, please save us." But the men were watching closely. They had no choice. So with tears running down her cheeks, Chioma began to cut. Her fingers shook so much that the knife slipped several times. Every sound, the slice of the blade, the splash of blood, the clatter of metal, echoed like thunder in her ears. They walked in silence. No one spoke. The men stood nearby, arms folded, watching every move. After a long, horrible time, the body was finally cut into smaller pieces. The smell in the air was unbearable. Chioma felt like she would faint, but the men ordered them to continue. "Cook it," one of them said. "Use your spices. Make it delicious." They obeyed. They washed the meat, placed it in the big pots, added water, pepper, onions, and seasoning. They stirred it quietly, their hands shaking as they cooked. The aroma that filled the air no longer smelled like food. It smelled wrong, heavy, and strange. Chioma's stomach turned. Tears rolled down her face, but she kept staring. She had never been so afraid in her life. They cooked in silence until the men finally nodded in satisfaction. "Good," one of them said. "You have done well. Now, wait." He turned to leave, locking the kitchen door behind him again. Chioma dropped the spoon, sat on the floor, and burst into tears. Her workers joined her. No one could speak. Their hands, their clothes, even their aprons were stained with blood. They didn't know what time it was or what would happen next. They only knew one thing. They had just cooked what no human being should ever cook. For a long time, the kitchen was silent. Madam Chioma and her team sat on the floor, too weak to stand, their eyes red and swollen from crying. The pot on the fire still boiled softly. The smell that filled the air was thick, heavy, and terrifying. It was not the smell of food. It was the smell of something that carried pain and death. Chioma kept wiping her face with the edge of her apron. Her hands were trembling. She looked at her workers. All of them were shaking too. Nobody said a word. Nobody knew what to say. Then, the sound of footsteps echoed again. The same men in black suits entered the kitchen. They looked calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. One of them sniffed the air and nodded. "Good," he said. "You did well." He walked around slowly, touching one of the pots and peeking inside. The others stood by the door, their guns visible. Then, the leader of the men looked at Chioma. "Now, you will eat from what you cooked," he said. Chioma's heart jumped. "Sir?" She asked quickly, her voice shaking. "You will all eat," he repeated. "If you don't eat, you won't leave here alive." Her workers gasped. One of them shouted, "Please, sir, we can't. We are not part of this. We only came to cook." The man raised his gun and aimed it directly at the young man's forehead. "Eat! Now!" Chioma's whole body went cold. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, have mercy. We can't." The man's voice grew sharper. "Eat it! Just a spoon. Show obedience. That's the order." Tears rolled down Chioma's cheeks. She turned slowly toward the pot. Her legs weak like paper. She picked up a spoon with shaking hands and scooped a little from the pot. Steam rose from the meat, carrying a strange, sickening scent. She closed her eyes and forced it into her mouth. The taste was unbearable. Her stomach turned immediately, but she swallowed, just to stay alive. When she opened her eyes, one of her workers was already crying loudly. "Madam, I can't. I can't do it." Chioma turned to him, her own tears falling freely. "Please, just do it. For your life's sake. Do it and let's leave this place." One after the other, they all obeyed. They dipped their spoons into the pot, forced small bites into their mouth, and swallowed them. Some gagged and vomited on the floor. Others fell to their knees, crying and praying. The men in suits stood there, watching them without emotion. When they were done, one of them clapped his hands once and said, "Good, you may rest now." They collected the spoons, covered the pot, and locked the kitchen door again. Chioma and her workers collapsed onto the floor, crying like children. Hours passed before the men returned. This time, the atmosphere was calmer. One of them carried a brown envelope, fat and thick. He dropped it on the counter and said, "Your payment." Chioma didn't touch it. She just stared at it with wide, empty eyes. 5 million naira, the man continued. "Count it if you want." No one spoke. The sound of that money felt like an insult, a reminder of what they had been forced to do. The man smiled slightly. "You should be happy. This is the biggest payment of your life." Then he added coldly, "But remember, you were never here. You saw nothing. You heard nothing. If you talk, you will regret it." Chioma nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her throat was dry, and her mind was numb. The man pushed the envelope toward her. "Take it." With trembling hands, she picked it up. The money was a new 1,000 naira note, tightly packed and smelling of chemicals. She wanted to throw it away, but fear held her still. After that, they were blindfolded again. The man gave a short order, "Get into the car." Chioma and her team obeyed silently. Their hearts were heavy, their spirits broken. No one dared to cry aloud. Only soft sobs filled the car as it moved away. The journey back felt longer than before. The car drove fast, making several turns. Chioma tried to listen carefully, hoping to recognize something familiar, but all she heard was the roar of the engine and the wind outside. Finally, the car slowed down. One of the men said, "We're almost there." They could feel the car turning again, then stopping. "Don't remove your blindfolds until we tell you," the man warned. The car doors opened. They were pulled out one by one and made to stand on what felt like rough ground. Then the man spoke again, his voice cold as ice. "You can remove your blindfolds now." Chioma untied her slowly. When her eyes opened, she realized they were standing by the roadside, an empty, dusty junction with no buildings nearby. Before they could say anything, the car door slammed shut. The black Lamborghini sped off and disappeared into the distance. Chioma stood there frozen. Her workers looked around in confusion. "Where are we?" one of them asked. "I don't know," she whispered weakly. "I don't even know where this is." They looked like ghosts, tired, sweaty, and broken. No one could speak. No one could think. After a long silence, Chioma finally whispered, "Let's start walking. Maybe we'll find someone who can help." And so, slowly, they began to walk down the lonely road, with the envelope of money still in her trembling hand. The road was long and lonely. Dust rose under their feet as Madam Chioma and her team walked slowly, dragging their bags and boxes. The sun had gone down, and the sky was turning dark. No one spoke. Everyone was lost in their thoughts. Their faces were pale, their uniforms stained with blood and tears. They didn't even know which direction they were going. They just wanted to find a familiar road, any sign of home. After walking for what felt like hours, they finally saw a small bus passing. Chioma waved her hand weakly, and the driver stopped. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Please," Chioma said softly, "take us to Asaba main town." The man looked at them strangely. Their clothes were dirty, their eyes red, and they looked terrified. But he didn't ask questions. He just nodded and said, "Get in and sit down." The bus moved quietly through the night. No one said a word. Only the sound of tires rolling on the road filled the silence. Chioma sat by the window, staring into the darkness. Her hand still held the brown envelope tightly. She wanted to throw it away, but she couldn't find the strength. As they got closer to town, street lights began to appear. The driver asked where to stop. Chioma was too tired to think. "Just stop anywhere close to the main road," she said softly. The bus stopped in front of a church. It was Sunday morning already. The sound of drums and singing came from inside. People were worshipping. The choir was singing, "There is power in the name of Jesus." Chioma looked at the church, and suddenly, her stomach turned. She felt something rise in her throat. Before she could move, she bent down and started vomiting beside the gutter. Her workers ran to her. "Madam, are you okay?" But before they could help her, they too began to vomit, one after the other. The scene was terrible. All of them bent over, throwing up, shaking, and crying. Some people coming out of the church stopped to look. The pastor of the church, a middle-aged man in a white shirt, rushed out when he saw what was happening. "What is going on here?" he asked in shock. "Who are these people?" One of Chioma's workers fell on his knees and began to cry loudly. "Pastor, please help us. We have done something terrible. We didn't know. We didn't know." The pastor looked confused. He knelt beside Chioma and held her hand. "Madam, talk to me. What happened to you?" Chioma was weak, but she managed to whisper. "We were called for a cooking job, but what we cooked was not food. We cooked a human being." The pastor's eyes widened in disbelief. "Jesus Christ!" he shouted. "What are you saying?" Tears poured down Chioma's face as she tried to explain everything. The black car, the mansion, the men with guns, the body, the first meal, and the envelope of money. The pastor listened silently, his mouth slightly open. When she finished, he stood up slowly and said, "This is not ordinary. This is evil. You people need deliverance right now." He called for other church members to help. They carried Chioma and her team inside the church. The worship service stopped as the congregation gathered around to pray for them. The pastor lifted his hands and began to pray loudly. "Every covenant made with blood, every evil connection through food, every curse from this ritual be broken in the name of Jesus." The church echoed with cries and prayers. Chioma and her workers wept as people laid hands on them, praying with passion. Some fell to the ground, trembling and shouting as if something was leaving them. After a long session of prayer, the pastor anointed their foreheads with oil. He told them to throw away the money and never return to that kind of job again. "You can't eat blood and go free," he said softly, "but thank God you are alive. Many people don't come back from such places." Chioma nodded weakly. She didn't need to be told twice. She knew she had escaped death, or something worse. That day, she made a vow before the altar. "From today," she said, "I will never go to any client's house again. If they want my services, I will cook it in my shop and take it there myself." The whole church shouted amen. She and her team went to their respective homes, but she took a break from her business. Months passed, but the memory of that day never left her. Even when she reopened her catering business, she was never the same again. She became quieter, humbler, and more careful about the kind of jobs she accepted. Her workers too were changed forever. Sometimes, when new customers called to invite her to cook in their homes, Chioma would simply smile and say, "No, my dear, I don't cook in people's houses anymore." And that was how Madam Chioma, the queen of the kitchen, became the woman who learned that not every opportunity is a blessing. Some are traps wearing the face of success. Dear friends, I hope you enjoyed this story. What lessons did you learn from this story? Kindly share your thoughts with me in the comments below. Give this story a thumbs up, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. Thank you for watching, and remember, every tale carries a lesson if only we chose to listen. Until I bring another true life tale your way, goodbye and remain blessed.